Good to see you again, Oren. Where are you calling in
Likewise.
from?
I'm calling in from New York City.
Where in the city are you living these days?
I live downtown in Manhattan, so Greenwich Village area.
Is that close to I'm not super, is that near Chelsea or am I way off?
Ish.
Okay.
10, 15-minute bike ride away. But it's kind of in between West Village, East Village, Soho, Union Square.
I'm always surprised by how long it takes to walk anywhere in Manhattan. I'm like, oh, it's only 2 blocks. It's like 40 minutes later.
Yeah, but that's the best thing to do. That's all we got here, walking.
You get lost in the city.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Take me back to the beginning of Rally. What were you doing before you started working on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the world of research in some way, shape, or form for the last 10 plus years now. So I started my career at a company called Alpha Sites, where my job out of college was to go out and recruit experts on very niche topics for one-on-one interviews with our customers.
Was this for expert networks, like the finance side? Oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. So I was that guy reaching out on LinkedIn or over email, cold calling, trying to pinpoint very, very niche experts on certain topics and asking them to meet with my customers.
It's that's like a crazy industry that most user researchers are not familiar with, because I think depending on who you are and where you work, like you can get paid outrageous sums of money for a 20-minute call where it's like, so how's production going in the factory this quarter?
Exactly.
Right? And it's like, well, we're ordering a lot of material, wink, wink, right? It's like not insider trading, but it's getting close with some of them.
So it's a fun industry.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And then are there like a ton of parallels just in the practice between, like modern day, like research that you would do in like a product company versus more on the finance side?
Well, at the end of the day, this first step of the process that we're laser focused on, which is recruitment, happens in every corner of the world of research. So little did I know I was spending first couple of years of my career becoming an expert on recruitment for research. And that's kind of been the thread that's carried me through to today with what we're building at Rally. But yeah, lots of parallels, especially with our B2B customers who are looking for more niche audiences, need to be handled with care and empathy and precise communication and all of that. So surprising amount of parallels.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I find like in the early days of building a company, the types of recruitment that you do that gets you who you want to talk to is generally quite different from as you scale. It's like a kind of a very different problem where now you're worrying about like compliance and documentation and like how often you're interacting with people. Whereas at the early stage, it's just as long as I can find the right person that like I'll talk to them as much as I can get. How do you think about that transition? Is there a transition? Do you just start talking to different people?
Yeah. So I guess today all of our customers are enterprise organizations. So they're the ones where reaching out to customers is a really high stakes activity. These are an organization's most precious asset, and every communication has to be handled with care. It has to be coordinated with the rest of the organization. There's a lot of, to your point, compliance and legal aspects of reaching out and coordinating with customers. So all that is core to how we work with our clients. But back to your question on how it works for early stage companies. So when we were starting Rally, Alec, who is, my co-founder as well, another fellow Alec.
There's only a handful of us, ain't that many.
Yeah, there ain't that many. They're all great people though, great people. And yeah, in the early days when we had no customers and just kind of an idea of what we potentially wanted to build, we knew we wanted to build software for research teams. And both of us believe deeply in the power of research and the power that getting consistent, continuous customer learnings can drive within organizations, but both saw how challenging it was for so many teams to be able to do something as simple as talking to a couple of users. In the early days, we really just did a ton of outreach to people that we thought would be interesting to talk to. So researchers, research ops folks at tech companies. And through those early conversations, that's how we were able to kind of start forming the idea around Rally, what ended up becoming the user research CRM, and what has taken us through almost 3 years later to today.
Yeah. When did it become like a company for you guys? Because I think you went through YC. You kind of really have been going down the startup journey as it is. But for most people, it goes from or for a lot of people, I think it goes from we're doing this interesting project to there's a switch that gets flipped at one moment where you're like, okay, I think we're really doing this thing now. Was it like that for you, or from the get-go, that was the way you were rolling?
Yeah, it did happen pretty quickly for us in terms of it becoming something real, just because back to the people that we were reaching out to in the early days to learn from and start getting feedback on our initial concepts. Fast forward to today, and some of those are actually our customers. So one example is Caitlin, who leads research ops at GitLab. She was someone that we had spoken with before we had any concepts, designs, ideas, but she felt the pain of user recruitment so deeply.
What did you talk to her about, for example? Was it, because you got the background that you have, are you going into this thing being like, hey, I think this sucks, and here are some ideas we have on how to address this. Are these interesting things to you? Do you want to continue to have a relationship? Is that the scope of the conversation?
Almost, yeah. So the first call with all these individuals was, just tell me about your process, your pain points. What does your job look like as a research ops or a research professional within your company? And as you break that down, what is the most painful part of your process? What's holding you back? What's really causing problems? And we were trying to do research, really, to just uncover what those pains and unmet needs were, and try to listen in their voices if it was really a hair on fire problem. Alec and I knew that we didn't want to solve a vitamin. We needed to solve a deep problem that really mattered more than what just this one individual was facing, but for the whole company. And that's what we kept on finding consistently in our initial conversations, was that recruiting, and specifically recruiting your own actual customers, is such a manual, logistical, painful, risk-prone, error-prone process that was holding back organizations from being able to do enough research with their customers, which, as we all know, has really negative ripple effects within an organization. You're building the wrong products for the wrong customers, and it costs a lot more to go back and fix things than to have built the right thing up front. So the more conversations we had, the more we were hearing the same pain point pop up over and over again. And that gave Alec and I enough fuel to be able to start coming up with some ideas. Do we want to build a community type platform? Do we want to build a CRM? Do we want to build XYZ? So we came up with a couple of those early stage ideas, reached back out to people like Caitlin, who had expressed a lot of frustration with their current workflow. And we just put up a couple slides, like, this is what we heard last time. Are these still your problems? We want to make sure that they're not just a one-off issue. And these are some ideas that we have for potentially solving them. What do you think? Give us your feedback. And we had 3, 4, 5 of these kind of iterative calls over the course of a couple of months with the same people, up until the point where we had some Figma designs that we were showing them, some mock-ups of what an early version of Rally could look like. And at that point, we had heard over and over again, when can I buy this? This is what we want. We need something like this. And that was the spark that allowed us to be like, okay, we're ready to start building this. Like, this is
a good sign. That's a good
really
piece of, it's a good positive piece of feedback when you hear people ask if they can buy it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's cool. So were you guys full time on it at that point already, or yeah, that's really. And at what point did you start? Because in order to start down the startup journey, you have to craft this like narrative. This it's like really this big storytelling exercise. What was that experience like for you as you go from, figuring out what the widget is, if you will, that you're starting with into like this grand narrative? Did you have coaching around that? Um, yeah, what was that process like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So definitely had a couple mentors early on, sales leaders and other entrepreneurs that I knew that helped us kind of connect that one hair on fire problem that we found with the bigger picture within these companies. So we knew as
How
well.
did you frame that, if you
Mhm.
don't mind me asking? Like, what was that bigger picture when you? Because I think this is also one of the things that's, I think, obviously hard for people who are starting companies, but also really hard for researchers. It's like, extrapolating from the first order impact to like you were saying, the ripple effects.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's all just trying to tie it back to the business and what the company really cares about, and is this a problem that you can tie some sort of line to a core business metric, whether it be churn, growth, NPS, whatever CSAT, whatever the company is trying to optimize for. What do they care most about? Being able to use questions and driving the conversation towards figuring out how what this one person is doing eventually ripples down to those core business metrics.
And do you do that by talking to like people like Caitlin, where you're just like, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? Did you talk to other people in the company to kind of get their point of view?
Totally. Yeah, it's you have to develop a holistic picture. So similar to in enterprise sales, you want to always multi-thread and talk to not just the user of the product, but also the executive, the buyer, the whole kind of committee that's going to be involved. And what's cool with research is it's we always say research is not a role, it's an activity. There's so many stakeholders involved within the research process, so many people that it touches and affects, that you can learn from each of those. Talk to the VP of product and VP of design. What happens if you don't get research as part of the work that your PMs and designers are doing? What does that mean for you? What kind of effects would that have? And you're able to develop this holistic picture or point of view on why increasing research throughput matters, why making sure you're talking to the right participants matters, and why being able to drive this kind of culture of continuous customer learning and discovery is critical.
Did you find that like when you had conversations with other stakeholders that you were learning things about research that maybe the researchers didn't know, um, or was maybe a little surprising? Because I'll tell you a quick story. I was talking to somebody who I was just interviewing somebody who's like a very senior research executive, and she was talking about mentoring people on her team, and she was explaining that she was a little frustrated at times because she would have people on her team occasionally come to her and be like, hey, such and such senior PM is not listening, or they're not taking my recommendation seriously, or whatever, this and that. And she started just saying like, well, have you asked them why? Like, what did they say when you talked to them about it? And then they'd be like, I haven't done that. And she'd be like, well,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a good place to start. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that I think it's pretty uncommon that I think like researchers are going and doing like, the sales equivalent of a quarterly business review, with the people that they're working with, being like, how are we doing? How are you feeling? Are you enjoying working with us? Are we delivering for you? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what separates the best from the rest. I think the research leaders that we've seen that have built those types of relationships with VP of product, VP of design, whoever else in the organization, and understand that every ounce of work that they do needs to connect to the business. Those are the ones that are being involved in every sprint, that they have the quote unquote seat at the table that everyone is looking for. But it's really just about aligning with the rest of what the business needs. Because if you're operating in your own little world, hoping that your insights are going to be used, that's when they typically become shelfware, and when people stop seeing the value.
Yeah. As Rally's grown, like what are some of the things that have really changed for you in terms of what it's meant to be? Because look, 2-person team at the beginning, you're doing everything. There's no need for process for anything because all the context is in your head all the time. There's no lines of communication that need to be drawn. You're just probably texting with other Alec and just being like, hey, where are we at on X or Y? But now I think you guys have a pretty sizable team. I see a lot of the content you put out. So for you personally, what's kind of changed about the role over the last few years in particular as you guys have scaled?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a team of 20 now, and what that means is my job is trying to make sure everyone has as much context as possible. And Alec and I can't take for granted everything that we've learned over the last couple of years. Those hundreds of conversations in the first couple of months of starting Rally with researchers and research ops folks have really shaped our brains into what then kind of created Rally and hired the initial team. But all of that information and the continued context that we get, it's so important that the rest of the team has that and can use that as a foundation for them to build upon and learn their own point of view on our market and our customers and their problems and pain points. So I view my job as the person who can or who needs to connect what we've learned all these years and what the market has been telling us to every new person that comes in, and make sure that they can learn as quickly as possible about everything research ops, research, the customers that we have, the product that we've built, the decisions we've made, so that they can continue upon it.
My cat has decided to join us
here.
There
we go.
And she's going to get fired.
No worries.
There we go. Small break there. Thanks, Kat, for interrupting. Do you feel like there's a category of research products called repositories that I'm sure you're well aware of, right? You're talking about all this context that you have, right, from all these conversations that you've had and whatnot. Do you have a repository of insights, or does it live differently? Because I'm a little skeptical that it's an effective tool for transmitting that versus, just a continuous pushing of a message in different ways over time, essentially. And I also think that there's probably like 3 or 4 things that matter a lot, and then a whole bunch of things that only matter a tiny little bit. And just focusing on just saying those 3 or 4 things that matter a lot over and over again is more important than making sure that everyone has access to the thousands of other little things that you've learned. So I don't know if you have any perspective on that, both as somebody who's building in the space and who has that particular problem to deal with of this constant context delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fun question. We don't have a traditional research repo. I don't think we're necessarily the ICP for it. I think larger companies have a deeper need for it. And to your point, I don't think that's what would solve the problem for us, as opposed to what you said, which was constantly delivering the message with the voice of the customer directly. And maybe a repo can solve that, and I just haven't looked into the way that it might be able to do so. But on our end, it's making sure that every customer communication that we are having today, that we're learning, that we're sharing with the rest of the team, so that if sales has a call, support has a call, CS, marketing does a testimonial call or something, we're all learning from each other's interactions with the customer and building upon that point of view, that message that we've crafted internally.
How are you doing that? Are you dropping notes in Slack after every call? Are you dropping recordings? Like, how do you get that out there? Because I find like whenever I have an interesting call where I learn stuff and it's like other people should know about this, I'm just either, if it's a message, I'm dropping screenshots. If it's a call, I'm dropping a few quick notes, and I just put it in a channel that everyone has visibility on. And it's just like, hey, this is what just happened. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, totally. It's snippet sharing and whatever process works for your company. But I think the most important thing that we found is this comes back to hiring, is hiring people who actually care about this problem or who can care. One thing we really look for during the hiring process is the first question we ask always, every interview, is why do you want to work here? And not to give away the answers to the test for anyone who may be applying to Rally and
do it
and listening to this, but we're really looking for people who have, of course, have the right experience and want to work at a startup and understand what all that means, but can really connect all of that back to our audience. Who are we building for and selling to, and why? And if they have some sort of POV on that, then that's really what's going to separate them, because I know when they come in that they're actually going to care, that they're going to spend the time listening to the clips and snippets that people share, that they're going to be interested and engaged and want to contribute to the body of knowledge that we're building here as a company. And so that's the most important thing for me. And then the method by which you share that information, I'm sure we can always make it more efficient, but clips is the way it is today.
Yeah. I like that. I think you can really do a lot of overkill. I come back to this, like, I had a thing way back in the day, the early days of Learners, when we were a tiny itty bitty meetup in Toronto. We had a meetup focused on research communication, and we wanted to like talk about different styles, some more intense, some less intense. So we had some people talking about like very intense reports, and I was taking the other side of the equation, which was doing the bare minimum. I gave a talk called "Doing the Least," and it did not go over well, apparently, with my coworkers that were at a product studio. That might not have been on brand, but essentially the gist of it was, look, all the time you spend working on a report, if you have a high trust team and you're trying to do things quickly, right? There's no reason you can't just, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we need to know. And if you've got that trust and they trust your judgment and they know how you work, right, they can always ask you questions and dig into it, and they say they disagree or whatever, and you can talk. But the ability to just quickly fire things off and not worry about the polish or the report or this or that can be really powerful way to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And we all have so many things going on at once. We need to pick where we spend that time going deep and where we can just, fire something off and just move quickly.
It's one of those things too, like that the busiest, most productive people, like the way they write emails, like back, when I was learning how to do this properly, it's hello, sir, introductory paragraph, context paragraph, ask paragraph, best regards, most sincerely, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now all the, you get exposed to some people that are like crazy productive people, and they'll write like one sentence or like one word responses, and it comes so fast and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lesson in that there too, right? Where, again, I think it all comes down to trust to some extent. If you have high trust relationships, then you don't need to always be putting in so much effort into putting all the context in there, because they know what you're capable of, or they know where they can trust your judgment and where they can't, or this or that. Then you can just get to do so much more, right? Whether that's more research, more planning, more strategy, more this, more that. Because all that extra communication work is really just like, it's not always busy work, but it really can be.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a good point. It's thinking critically about everything you're doing. Is this busy work, or is this actually important that I go deep on sharing the context here? And making those types of on the fly decisions, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, there's someone that I know, like Bezod, who's given a bunch of talks about just like curiosity around an organization and learning around an organization. And if you remove so much, I think of our practice today has been developed because of constraints that existed 20 years ago, right? If you think about how hard it was to like reach out and touch people back in the day, like it was much more difficult than it is today. It was much more difficult to record things, clip things. Back in the day, you would have a camera set up with a stand and somebody, you could see their hands and they're tapping on a phone underneath. It was like really hack job stuff. And, I think a lot of the fundamentals of the practice haven't necessarily been revisited. And I think ultimately, with any of this stuff, you're trying to build like better learning systems, right? Because that's what it's about. It's like, how are you learning about your customers? How are you learning about how they use your product and what you want and all that stuff? And I think one way of doing that is to like take the craft and just like move it online versus where it used to be more analog. But then there's the other part of it, which is which parts of the craft were designed in a way with constraints of yesterday in mind versus today. And I think that's like one of the most interesting things, especially if you're building in the space, which is, like you said, you talked about these workflows at GitLab or whatever it was. And you can obviously take a lot of those workflows and just make them better, like marginally better. But could you eliminate some of those workflows? Could you reimagine some of those workflows? And once you get to a certain point, you can start to actually put that into play and say, well, let's completely rethink how we do recruiting, or let's completely rethink how we do customer communication from a research point of view.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's one of the most fun parts of this job and working within B2B in general is that the immense levels of pain that people are in their working world is just wild. Like these big organizations, people are doing, even today, especially today, so much manual work, so much data entry, pushing things between different tools. And in our consumer lives, we're so used to everything being so smooth and convenient. And, one little thing goes wrong on Amazon or on Instagram and you're freaking out because that's not how it's supposed to work. But then we have this pain tolerance within our working worlds for these archaic tools and systems and processes that we've built and have a hard time even imagining a better world than what we're operating in today. And yeah, I just think there's so much opportunity to make the working lives of especially researchers and research ops folks who we support so much better, and what that unlocks for them. It's not just a matter of making it better for the sake of it, but to the point earlier, if there's so much strategic value that researchers, and I think especially research ops folks, can bring to their businesses, that if we could just eliminate these manual workflows that they're getting used to operating in on a day-to-day basis, and give them the mental space and freedom to concoct new ways to support and evangelize their work and practice. I think that has massive positive
What are some of
ripple effects.
What are some of the things that you think that are the like strategic initiatives, if you will, that a lot of, whether it's research ops or researchers, people don't have the capacity to do right now, that you're like, man, if they just had 10 hours more a week, they'd be moving some real needles?
Yeah. Well, I think researchers and research ops people have the keys within their skill sets to actually create cultures within companies that are user driven and user first. Every big company talks about being customer driven, listening to the voice of the customer, etc. But
it's the best cliche. It really is.
Yeah. And nobody knows how to do it except for the researchers and the research ops folks, because it's not just a matter of setting up more calls with customers. It's everything that goes into the process of thinking about who should I even talk to in the first place, and identifying those people and easily, seamlessly connecting with them, which is where we come in. but then it's about asking them the right questions in the conversations to make sure that you're actually learning from them. And then what do you do with those insights and learnings after the fact to make sure that you're actually making some decisions or leveraging them in a positive way? And no one has the holistic perspective on how to do this work other than researchers and research ops folks. And nobody cares, frankly, as much as for the user as these people do. No one has as much user empathy. No one has as much user understanding within any company as researchers and research ops people do. So I think they have this unique set of capabilities and skills that can actually drive organizations towards really being user-centric and listening to their customers and building incredible products and becoming wildly successful as a result. But if they're bogged down in manual administrative work, it's never going to happen. They're never going to have the space to actually drive the change that they're capable of. And that's what we're all trying to do, building software in this space and trying to elevate these people so they can do their best work and drive real change.
Yeah, I love that. It's fun too because that's also where like a lot of the creativity can come into play, right? One of the things that was interesting insight that I remember learning was that watching, just like being close to hearing something from a customer or watching them do a thing. If you're in a readout and you're delivering your results, and 6 out of 8 people said this, and the engineer might say, well, how accurate is this, and is that the right sample, and this and that. But if they get to see it happen, and especially if they get to see it live, right, like that, like 10 seconds of seeing that is worth so much more culturally, in like, okay, oh, yeah. I get it. I see that's a problem. I can tell immediately that's a problem. I'm going to go fix that right now, kind of thing. Where just that tiny fraction of input was that valuable. And, how often do we have the time to figure out what is the right data, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, to put out to the organization that's actually going to help them understand or, change hearts and minds and all that stuff. And it takes iteration, right? Like it's a real initiative. So like you said, if you're so busy trying to like collect non-disclosure agreements and whatnot, mm-hmm. The last thing you're going to want to do is look at a computer screen again after that, right? To figure that stuff out.
Yeah, totally. And I think another aspect of this as well, which isn't focused on enough, but something that research ops people think about quite a bit, is the quality of the participant that you're talking to. And so one parallel that I like to make is if you're a salesperson, you have a finite amount of time during the day to talk to prospects. If you have a couple of discovery calls set up or intro conversations, you want to make sure that every call you have is with the right fit person. The difference between having a call with an ICP, really good fit prospective customer, and someone who's totally outside of your wheelhouse is night and day. You feel like with the ICP customer, everything's clicking. There's a good fit on both sides. The dynamic is positive. Things are going in the right direction. With a bad fit customer, there's just wrong tension, wrong friction. It's not a fit. It's a waste of everyone's time. And the quality of output from both of those is going to be dramatically different. You can make a really great sale, change the trajectory of your company with one, and have a really, useless conversation on the other side. And the same goes with research. The quality of your participant and the quality of your interaction and the quality of, therefore, the decision that you make comes directly back to who you're talking to. If you're talking to the right person who you're trying to actually solve problems for, that's going to drive a dramatically different outcome than talking to anyone or a random person or potentially a lookalike or bad fit. And so much thought and effort has to go into ensuring that all the research that's being done is with the right quality participant, or else everything else falls down the wayside.
I think that's very well said. I think, it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? It's the exact same thing
Totally.
here. Leave us with one prediction, maybe not a prediction, something you're hoping for. There's obviously been a tremendous amount of change the last 2-3 years in this space, some for the better, some maybe not. What's a change that you hope we see for the research space in the next year or two?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm already seeing some positive movement in this direction, but I'm hoping to continue seeing research teams and research ops teams ask the hard questions of how they can continue to tie their work to what the business cares about and the business impact. This is only going to become more important, and the researchers that are stepping up and taking this on and taking on a genuine curiosity and an ownership over tying their work to the business impact, that's how they're going to ensure their longevity and their value and how they're going to click and align with the rest of the organization and remove this concept that they're less valued or outcasts or on their own island. So I am hopefully optimistic, cautiously optimistic that things are continuing in that direction and that research is continuing to elevate itself as a practice because I think that's what this world needs.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining me, bud. And looking forward to our next chat.